A very good morning to one and all present here. I, Dr. Manasvi Maheshwari, on behalf of DME Media School, welcomes you all to a special session on new labor codes, how these would impact the working journalist. The session has been organized by DME Media School on the occasion of International Workers' Day, which is celebrated worldwide on May 1. Our resource person for the session is Professor Jethwani, former Professor IIMC and former Senior Research Fellow ICSSR. We welcome you, ma'am. I would like to take a moment and introduce DME Media School to you. DME Media School is one of the most promising media institute in the country. It offers BA in Journalism and Mass Communication program. It is recognized as a school focused on the growth of its faculty and students through academic and co-curricular activities. Major flagship events and initiatives of the school include BG Varghese Lecture Series, Peer-to-Peer FDP, International Film Festival SIFI, International Conference ICANN, and Vritika Convention of Media Students. And newly added to the list is WIZ, Vibrant India Series. DME Media School believes in imparting world-class education to its students, while training them to develop and enhance their skills. This education and training enable them in taking up challenges of the industry and creating a space for themselves with their competence and vigor. Today's session is one such initiative to provide you insight into the labor laws and new labor code in India. Now, I request Dr. Shushmita Bala, Professor and Head DME Media School, to formally welcome the guest.
Thank you, Manasvi. Good morning, everyone present here. Basically, May Day or International Workers' Day is celebrated by laborers and the working classes. That is promoted by the international movement. Why this is important for us? Because ma'am is taking about condition of working journalists, hours of working journalists, leaves, gratuity, and other aspects. It is my proud pleasure to welcome Professor Jaitwani, former Professor IIMC and former Senior Research Fellow ICSSR, to address the students of BA JMC program on the topic. The program has been conceptualized keeping in mind the International Workers' Day, which is celebrated on May 1st. Professor Jaitwani is a researcher who has worked extensively in this area. I'm sure that the session will be useful for the students and faculty members also. I welcome him for taking time out for DME Media School. We all are looking forward to your session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I will invite Priya Yadav, student of BA JMC program, to share a profile of our eminent speaker, Professor Jaishri Jaitwani. Priya?
Professor Jaishri Jaitwani did her doctorate from the School of International Studies JNU in Media and Elections, which included extensive fieldwork in India, Germany, and USA. Dr. Jaitwani went to New South Wales for her fellowship in PR. After a long stint at the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, spanning over 25 years as professor and program until 2016, when she demitted office. She joined the Institute for Studies in Industrial Development, a public-funded national-level policy think tank working on media policy issues. Professor Jaitwani has been a lead communication expert for many international consultancy taken on behalf of UNESCO, UNICEF, UNFPA, World Health Organization, and USAID. She is on the board of studies of several central and state universities. In her long career, she has designed and anchored more than 150 training programs of various duration in the areas of corporate communication, advertising, social marketing, disaster communication, and corporate social responsibility. Among her many books, Dr. Jaitwani's books The Beauty Paradigm, Gender Discourse in Indian Advertising, based on her seminal research study for ICSSR, has been published in October 2021. Among the many awards that Professor Jaishri Jaitwani has received, some of which include the Exceptional Woman of Excellence by Women Economic Forum 2019, Best Professor Award World Education Congress 2013, and the Leadership Award in PR Academics from the PRSI 2010. In her last assignment, she was associated with ICSSR as a senior research fellow based at ISID. Her research engagement was studying the wages and related issue in the in the Indian news industry, which also look at the gender equality and equity for women journalists. Besides this study, inquires into the new labor laws that have included the two acts concerning the wages and working condition of journalists and other employees in the news industry. Passed in the 1950s in the overarching labor law, its implication for the news media workforce.
Thank you, Priya. I would request Dr. Ambrish Saxena, Professor and Dean DME Media School, to address the gathering on the topic. Sir.
So I welcome Professor Jaishi Jethwani to accept our invite to be here to address the students on this more pertinent thing. As just now I was discussing with you all how this becomes important to us all, for all the journalists and would-be journalists, or for all those who will be working in the media industry, whichever capacity you will be working. And it's not only the question because once this Working Journalist Act is abolished, which is almost going to be extinct. Now, that act was referred to print journalists or the news agencies journalists, but then the new labor code will be applicable on everybody, whichever media platform somebody is working, right from print, radio, television, digital and all. So what will be the implications of all this new labor codes on journalists? That will be the main focus of today's a special lecture by Professor Jaitwani, and she has been deep into this subject, researching on this for the last 2 years or so, so there can be no better person to give an insight on this issue. So we are looking forward to have a very meaningful session today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for a very indulgent introduction. So good morning once again to all of you, and I hope you feel concerned about yourself as budding professionals. Very soon, couple of years' time, you would be entering the market. So before I really start my discourse, I'll really like to thank Professor Ambrish Saxena for thinking about this. May Day, many people have forgotten about it. And it's generally in the industrial corridors, trade unions, that you find that people are celebrating May Day. Basically is to remember the struggles they have gone through and what is that they could do for their fellow brothers and sisters. And journalists, as journalists, I just understood that you are going to be taught media, mass media laws in this semester. But if you see your syllabus, no one talks about labor laws. So no one talks about what is going to be the state of the people who are going to be journalists. But we generally teach you various laws which concern journalism, like law of defamation, libel, slander, copyright, invasion to privacy. What about the people who are pursuing journalism as a profession? That's very unfortunate. I feel a little morbid about it. But then, when this opportunity came to me 2 years back, I've just submitted, in fact, just about a month ago, these very, long kind of research which I did for 2 years, in which I'm very happy to inform you that DME also participated. Like we went to COVID situation, I was not able to do much research, personally, primary research. The one person I think about in time of distress is Ambrish Saxena, because we know each other for the last 25 years when he was heading the IP University. From then on, I've been visiting there and we have been in touch with each other. So I asked him in case we could do a virtual meet in which we can discuss these issues. And there we did, about 1.5 years ago. And we had more than 1,500 people joining, students, faculty, lawmakers. And we had some wonderful insights which probably I would not have been able to do during just my primary research. So a lot of credit goes to DME, especially Ambrish Saxena and Sushmita and the other faculty members. So what I'm going to talk to you today is, journalism as a profession or media as an industry, and I'm sure you're into second semester, and with Amrish as your professor, he would have given you a lot of insights. But it's very important to first understand two phenomena. One is media industry per se, and two, the laws, the new laws which are going to come very soon. These were passed in 2019 and 2020, but they're still not operationalized. One of the reasons is that we knew that we had, that's what is my understanding, that it takes time to work out guidelines and rules before the laws are operationalized. So that's a good thing for the media industry, not even media industry, for the working journalists. Two, because they saw when the farm laws were implemented, we saw what happened in the country. For more than a year, we found that, the farmers were out on the streets, summers, winters, rains, and we knew that these laws had to be withdrawn. And the way these laws have been formulated, the 4 courts, I'll be coming to that in detail, my gut feel is that is going to open a can of worms, because there are a lot of people, it is thought that they are employee centric, and it's not just about the journalists, it's about almost 50 crore people in the country. The government's perspective is that these were long overdue, and these are very employee centric, but then when a law is made into, a bill is made into law, there are a lot of interpretations which come from the experts, the concerned people, so on and so forth. And there has been, for the last 1 year or so, there has been a lot of discussion, debates, a lot of, you find even silent marches, candle marches against some of the provisions of the law. So I don't want to scare you, but then it's very important for you as, people who have chosen journalism or media as a career, that, you might worry about the whole world when you go out with your pen or with your camera to cover the events. You must think about yourself also. You must be, aware about what are your rights and what is that you must do. Should you be joining a trade union? Should you be joining a professional association? So these things are very important. And my primary research, which I was able to do, online, it informed me that out of, almost, it wasn't a very big sample, almost about 100 people who responded to my online questionnaire. So I found that more than 80% youngsters who were journalists were not members of any association or trade union. One thing is they don't care about it. Today I have this job, tomorrow I have another job, I don't care. The other is that the jobs are no more permanent. You get ad hoc jobs, 6 months, 1 year, or you can be fired at the will of the employer. So if you're not permanent, you cannot become a member of the trade union. So see, it's a catch-22 situation, that you joined a profession, but you cannot, be a part of an association or trade union where you can give vent to your feelings. So it's not easy. The most difficult job, to my mind, among all the jobs one has, journalism, communication is the most difficult, because you put your life in the line of fire. You go and collect, stories for which a lot of people are looking at you. If it is critical, you know that your life or your career could be endangered, but still you go on working. And all those people you watch on the television, some of you follow also, some of you think that, they are so empowered, they are so powerful, but only if you look at their life, how they are working, except for the minuscule, 0.1% or maybe 0.5%. For the rest of them, the life is difficult in every which term. So I thought I'll just give you this background so that you're more interested in listening to your own future story. Yeah? Okay. So I will just, flip this, because Sushmita told you about that and your sir also told you about that. So basically it's not an Indian thing, it's international thing. The trade unionism started somewhere in the 19th century, 1860s, 1875 in India. Probably the first, strike was, if I'm not mistaken, in Maharashtra, which had to do with looms and people who work in textile industry. Okay? So, but from then on, if you see the status today, there are more than 16,000 trade unions in this country, small little. But the major ones, ITech, INTech, Hindustan Mazdoor Sabha, which are affiliated to various political parties, which means Congress has, CPIM has, BJP has. So what it means? There's a lot of politics also into trade unionism. Okay? So you see as a journalism student, it's very important for you to understand the many layered profession which you are going to enter and the dynamics of that profession. One, what you cover, and two, your state in the media industry itself. So you have to make a kind of a juxtaposition of both the things to be successful. In fact, I got an invite from the Delhi Union of Journalists, which was set up 73 years ago on May Day, because they started their celebration 2 months in advance, and they had it one yesterday also. And Sujata Madhuk, who, if you remember, we had invited her for our webinar, so I'm on her mailing list. So I also get a lot of invite for the programs, and I find most of the programs which they do, they have to do with, one, the state of working journalists, two, the state of media. Which way is the media going? You are not young anymore, about 21. What's your age? 18, 19, 19. But you have the right to vote. Okay? So you are adults. You have a right to vote. You can elect your representatives. So it's very important to understand various things also. So I'm sure you all watch news. If you don't watch, you better start watching. There are 400 news channels in this country of various languages. There are more than 1 lakh newspapers and publications, which is by far the most, I think, is the highest number than anywhere else in the world. But we are also a big number. So this is the kind of, and look at the social media scene, the internet scene. Every hour, 300 hours or 3,000 hours of video are uploaded every hour. We have 24 hours into 30 days, into 24 into 7, into 365 a day in a year. So imagine how much user generated material is available. So what it means? You know, generally we thought that the media guys were the opinion makers, because they were the kind of a conduit between the people and those who govern us, because they bring their stories to and fro. But with internet, with World Wide Web, anyone who thinks he has something to say from anywhere in the world, who has access to any OTT platform or any World Wide Web platform, is posting his or her way of thinking on issues, myriad issues, which means that we have, and how many are we in the world? 7.6 billion people in the world. And I understand that about 50%, about 44 or 45% people have access to the social media. Imagine if 4 billion people have access to the social media and they are posting something or the other at least once in a day or once even in a week. How much information do we have? And the empirical data suggests us that people trust more what common men and women write than probably what comes through the filtered media. Because you think it's my story, his story, her story, so they can't be telling lies. So this is the kind of information overload which we have, which means as journalists, you are in competition with anybody else, because anybody can be a writer. He may not be called a journalist, but he is a writer, right? So how do we define labor? Because generally when we talk about labor, we think somebody who is working in a construction site, a plumber, a mason. That's what we have grown up learning, but no. Almost, in India, as I said, almost 46, 60, must be about 50 crores now. 50 crore people comprise the labor force or the workforce. And how do we define them? It comprises people in the ages of 15 and older who supply labor for the production of goods and services during a specified period. It includes people who are currently employed and who are also unemployed, seeking job as first-time job seekers. Not everyone who works is included, however. Unpaid workers, family workers, students are often omitted, and some countries don't count members of the armed forces as a labor force. Journalism was never considered an area of labor. But what is the problem now? Now even media industry has been made part of these labor laws. Your sir told you that there was special legislation for media people which were passed in the 1950s after much deliberations. Why these were passed? Because media has a role of a watchdog in a democracy. They are supposed to be independent interpreters of the events. They are not taking any sides. A different matter, they might be taking sides. But if you look at the normative, the job of media is to look at things, what is happening around independently and work as a fourth estate in a democracy. What are the three other estates? The executive, the legislature, the judiciary. Very good. So this is supposed to be an independent estate in a democracy. What is the state of media, how ideologically they are driven, I will not get into that. This is not subject of current discourse that I am sure your sir would have told you, other teachers would have told you, or maybe some other time when we talk about the state of media per se. Today we will concentrate on the other side of the issue, how it is going to impact the working journalists. So now let's come. I talked to you about media as a phenomenon. Okay, one more thing before I get on to labor. It's very important for us who work in media, who are media academics, who are media students, to understand the sociology of the media. What is meant by sociology of the media? The ownership and control of media. Who controls media? Is media, on the one hand I told you, media is supposed to be a watchdog, an independent interpreter. But when you look at the sociology of the media the world over, and especially look at India, 90% of the media is owned by, controlled by whom? You have the answer? Big business, not government, big business houses. 90% of the media is owned by big business houses. So for example, if there are 20 factories, 18 are assembly line or drilling, the 2 factories are media factories. Which means what? Simple, no money for guessing. If I am the owner of say 20 factories and one of the factories media factory, so one thing I will ensure that my media which I own does not write anything adverse about me. True? You all agree? Otherwise, I will close that media. Why would they write against me? 2, when I have 18 factories running in thousands of crores, what else do I have? The power to control. So how do I control media? I control through revenue generation by the media. How do media generate revenue? Through advertisement support. So if I have 18 factories selling soaps and detergents, drilling oil and whatnot, service industry, so my companies would be advertising in the media. We reach out to the people with our products and services ideas through the media, newspapers, magazines, television, the online media. So these big business houses control the media in 2 ways. 1, they own media. 2, they give ads to the rest of the media. Not only their own media, the rest of the media. So now onwards, I will suggest that all of you as responsible citizens, future journalists, future media persons, start looking at the media a little differently. So when you read the news, even news is paid now. Some of the pages you can get written what you want to get written at a price. The business pages of most newspapers are quote unquote paid. Okay? So if you start reading the news columns, read with a little more focus, and I can assure you, if you do that exercise just for 1 month, without any aid from any teacher, you will become expert in knowing which news is paid, which news is unpaid. That will help you when you become journalist, which means that in a newspaper or in a media, so there's a news which is, accessed by the journalists. The news comes from the agencies, news agencies. The news comes from the PR agencies, the corporate ones who pay and get it done. And the rest of the space or time is devoted to what? Advertisements. So now are you able to dissect what a media property is? It's not difficult, but you have to be, very smart. My first and last thing used to be at IIMC, or I have addressed almost most of the universities, I would say that be very selfish when you are a student, because this time will never come. Read as much as you can, become as smart as you can. These 3 years, if you understand the dynamics media, nobody can let you down. You understand what you're doing the rest of your life, or you wish not to do rest of your life because you understand what it is. Yeah. So that is what the media scene is. It's huge. If you look at the industry, I think it's almost it employs about 5 lakh people, including media, entertainment, advertising, all put together, runs into lakhs of crores. The advertising revenue is about 1 lakh crore, which comes from the corporate sector, okay? And there are, so many newspapers, TV I told you the controls. So this is, and you are going to be part of that ecosystem, which I have told you. Every journalist student who joins a media school, when you ask him or her, why you join? Why do you want to be a journalist? The general answer I've heard is, I want to change the world. I see so much corruption. I see so much, desperation. I see so much poverty. If only I can do something. But once you become a journalist, it's not that easy that you are able to get written, because you don't run a newspaper, what you want to write. So understand that dynamics, that you're part, a small cog in the wheel of the big media, right? Now let's look at the labor law so that you're able to understand the juxtaposition of both. In India, both central government and state governments can make laws, labor laws, okay? That's why it is in the concurrent list of the constitution. You know what's a concurrent list? Some of your political science students, civics student, there's a state list, there's a central list, there's a concurrent list. In the concurrent list, both center and state are authorized to do laws, okay? In 2019 and 2020, and there were hundreds of labor laws, both in center and state, which some of them become very archaic. They came maybe in the British time. Some were repetitive, some were contradictory. So around 2000, I would say 1999 and early part of 2000, when we had the NDA government, Jaishi ji was the prime minister. So it a second labor commission was set up, which suggested that instead of having too many laws, because when too many laws, is the labor who suffer because the interpretation is very difficult. So they thought, let this labor commission give us suggestions how to go about making laws which are which are labor friendly, which can help the employees. That was the objective behind that. And this labor commission, second labor commission, suggested that about 4 dozen laws should be subsumed into 4 or 5 major labor codes. And then in 2005, as we know, we had the UPA government for 10 years. So I think it was put on the back burner. Nobody talked about it. So when the NDA government again came into power, when did they come into power? When? 2014, good. So you're politically active, good. Though none of you would have voted as of now, I understand. Next mein karenge, doesn't matter. So 2014, when the new government came, the NDA government came, they brought the discussion back on the table, okay. So when a bill is presented, so generally what they do in the parliament, a parliament standing committee is made, which has a chairman, which is not necessarily from the treasury benches. What is the treasury bench? The party in power. It can be from any other party. Okay, so Kirit Somaiya was in once, and then we had the Mehtab, Mr. Mehta from the Biju Janata Dal in the second. So they headed the standing parliamentary committees. And what's the job of the parliamentary committee? To get information, to get advice from all the stakeholders. So here the stakeholders were trade unions, companies, professional associations, and I'm not talking about just media. Media was only a part of it as a media industry. Imagine the kind of factories and industrial belt we have. So about 2 to 3 years those discussions went on, because they would be meeting, then there will be a lot of discussions, parleys, then they will come out with a report which will be submitted to the cabinet, and finally there is a discussion in the parliament and the bill is converted into an act. This is how it works. So for both these, for all these labour laws, there were 2 committees which were set up, which did a lot of their work together. And Mr. Mehtab, I know, is a very serious kind, he has won so many awards, best parliamentarian award, because he does his job very, very seriously, very educated guy. He is also editor of a newspaper from Odisha, right? And we were very lucky to have him address our webinar which I spoke to you about, and he gave us some very interesting insights on what they could do, what they could not do, and finally what the bill was able to be converted into an act. So all these from 14 to 19, these parleys discussions are going on, and one of the bill, wages bill, was passed in 2019. The rest of the bills, which I'll come to you and talk to you about, industrial relations, OSH and the other one, social security, were passed in 2020, but still they have not been operationalized. They were supposed to be operationalized from 21 April. But because of the COVID situation, many states had not sent their input, whether these were good enough or whatever, because of COVID situation. And also probably government might have thought they were undergoing this problem with the farm laws. So probably they gave some respite to that, and even as of now they are not operationalized, but very soon they would be. This I spoke to you about. So which were the laws, basic laws which were subsumed? So you find Factories Act, Plantation Act, 2 which are in a dark shade highlighted are the Working Journalists and Other Newspaper Employees Conditions, Services and Miscellaneous Provision Act 1955, the Working Journalists Fixation of Rates Wages Act 1958. So these 2 acts, which I said some time ago, were passed by the parliament to support the journalists, because in the media industry 99% in the private sector. So you cannot have a standard employment, your salaries, wages as you have in the government. So this became a bone of contention also. Right from the 50s until the last wage board, which was set up by the government in 2008 or 9, major media organizations like Indian Express, Times of India, others have fought bitter battles in the court, questioning the government that why do you need to have wage board for the media industry? Do you have wage board for others? They had wage board for some industries like sugar, cotton and all, but these were withdrawn over a period of time. The wage board for only the media industry was continuing, which will be set up every 8 to 10 years, and they will tell the government what the journalists should be getting in terms of wages, in terms of perks, and then many implemented also, okay, which means every time the media had to shell out more money as wages for their employees, which they never liked. So with these labour laws, when they are operationalized, so these wage boards are gone, which means as journalists, you would get your salaries as would be decided by the various media organizations independently. So what was the situation before that? That the wage board would give you similar salaries, whichever company, media company you worked, depending on A, B, C, how big is the company, what is the revenue, so on and so forth. So this is the biggest problem or biggest issue which the media guys are going to face, because I have spoken to a lot of people. They said life was so good, it was just like being in government. You cannot be fired once you have a job. If you were fired, there were laws to protect you. You had a certain salary which was protected. you had certain perks which were protected, which have been taken away with these new labor laws. That's one. You keep it in mind. So these are the 4 labor codes now. Labor Code on Wages passed in 2019, Industrial Relations Code passed in 2020. I'll tell you each one what it means. The Occupational Health, Safety and Working Conditions Code 2020, Code on Social Security passed in 2020. As I said, they will be implemented soon. Okay? So on the face of it, they look very good. So when I did my research, the youngsters especially thought now they'll have a government kind of a job, so much social security, so much health, and they are going to look after your medicines, everything. So they thought, oh thank God, now we won't have ad hoc jobs, we shall have permanent jobs. But let me tell you, there's nothing called permanence in media, neither it was nor it's going to be. So what are really the concerns about the new codes in one line? The codes are seen as employer-centric and anti-trade unions and workers by the critics. There seems to be no provision for permanent employment, pension, etc. in the new laws. This is the crux of these 4 codes. So let's look at what the wage code is. One of the criticism of the code is that does not neither defines nor outlines the methodology for fixing an adequate minimum wage. What really is a minimum wage? Okay? Like in India, we have for the labor, when they work for the Magnarega and others, that somebody is unskilled might get 200 rupees a day, somebody might get 180, somebody might get 600. So those wages. But media guys, and why should media industry or the working journalists be seen as labor? वो तो कलम के सिपाही है ना, वो लेबर थोड़ी है, वो इंटेलेक्चुअल काम करते हैं, isn't it? And they are the watchdog of in a democracy. So how can you term them as labor? That's the biggest problem. The media industry may be very happy, by the way. The industry would be happy. The working journalists are not happy because they have been fighting bitter battles in the court from 1950s onwards that why do you have a wage board? Do you know how much are we earning? How can you tell us? Unless until you know our working condition, you can't tell us to pay so and so. So some of their concerns were also genuine. But then most of it was that when we can do away with paying them good salary, why should we pay them handsome salary? And I have done this research also as part of this research that it's only 0.5 or 0.3% of the journalists who might be getting salaries in lakhs or in crores. Some of them, by the way, get 5 crore to 10 crore in a year. I'll not tell you, it's being recorded, so Amrish is going to tell you later in the class. But there are others who don't get even 15 to 20,000 rupees in a month. And the other issue is, if you look at the whole workforce, I wouldn't call it labor force, the workforce in the media industry, if you look at the NSSO, which is the government's census on the employment, it tells you there are only less than 10,000 journalists in the country. Can you imagine? When there are more than 1 lakh newspapers and magazines, 400 news channels, so many platforms, print platforms and the video platforms on the World Wide Web, how can there be only 10,000? So I kept on thinking, how can government go wrong? It didn't take me more than 1 minute to know why it was so, which means that's my understanding. Nobody is going to tell me this right or wrong. These less than 10,000 must be quote unquote the permanent guys who have been selected or employed by the various media houses till they reach the age of 60, 58 or 65, whatever it is. The rest of them are ad hoc or non-permanent. And the third category is what we term as stringers. Now, stringer is a term used for journalists who are not attached to any particular newspaper, but they have some kind of understanding with some newspapers or magazines and also the television channels. So they source stories for them, okay? They have video stories for them, and they are paid by per line or per 10 seconds, and they are not on anybody's wish list, okay? They have no permanent jobs. Rather, when they take their mic, because there is a label on the mic, brand on the mic, Aaj Tak, NDTV, India Today and so on and so forth. For that mic, which is in the public domain, and I spoke to them, they give a security of more than 25,000 rupees because they go as representatives of that company, but they don't get paid, they don't get recognized, they have no provident fund, they have no medical, they have no insurance, and they are the ones, in my mind, in my view, who are behind many breaking news stories coming from small little villages, tehsils and districts, but they are the unsung heroes. 99% time, their name also does not appear. The program webinar which we had, so one of the persons from the Press Council of India told us that in many districts and tehsils where the stringers work, I mean all the newspapers are run through the stringers, but they are not even on the pay list of the companies, small little companies who run their newspapers with 6 to 8 or 10 stringers, and they are asked to give an undertaking that they are hobby journalists. They are not journalists, they are doing it as a hobby so that tomorrow they should not lay claim on that I was a journalist in this company. So they take an undertaking, so unfortunate. And I feel that in the entire media ecosystem, stringers are the largest in number, and many stringers I spoke to, they are not those hobby journalists. They have gone through schools like these, from big schools. They are MA also in journalism because they don't get a job, so they turn into a stringer. So this is the media ecosystem, and now the wages, as I said, there's no fixed criteria. Is it going to be one kind of a wage all over the country, or the different states are going to have a wage, which means it is fluid. Let's look at the IR code, industrial relations. The new code has altered the conditions for workers on strikes. The definition of strike now would also include if 50% or more workers are taking casual leave, they will be deemed to be striking work illegally. Many times we generally say, okay, pen down strike, we all take casual leave. We have done it in our working conditions. It was never considered a strike, but now with the new code it will be considered as a strike. Earlier the notice period of 2 to 4 weeks were required for a strike, which has now been changed to a minimum of 2 months. 2 months is a very long period, but the issue might get resolved or just die down. So now from 2 weeks to 2 months. Another thing which is very, very lethal, in case of a pending proceeding before a labour tribunal or the National Industrial Tribunal, workers will be barred to strike work for 60 days after the case is concluded, which means what? Number one, the tribunal is going to take its own sweet time, 1 month to 2 years to 3 years, and after it is decided, 60 more days. So where is the right with the worker? You understand now? You can't just decide and strike work. Now it is going to be impossible to strike work, which means and flash strikes have been rendered illegal under the new code. You can't just say, okay, workers join together, we are on strike. You can't do that. It's illegal. Which means what? It's more employer centric than employee centric. The value of trade unions has completely been decimated. Another very important thing, until now, till the time the new labour codes come, if a company has 100 employees, you can close the company without taking the approval of the government, the labour ministry in a state or in centre. Now the threshold has been raised for layoff and retrenchment to 300 employees. अगर आपके पास 300 एम्प्लॉयज़ हैं, आप क्लोज करना चाहते हैं, सबको आप निकाल देना चाहते हैं, आपको किसी की परमिशन की ज़रूरत नहीं है. Which means what? And imagine a newspaper will not have more than 300 employees. 99% newspapers will have less than 300 employees at one place. And some of them very smart, they have divided the company's various units. So if HT or Times of India has many kind of editions, I do not know, but they might be under different companies or different kind of establishments, which means 300 people can be fired, the company can be closed if it is not making profit without seeking any permission, without the law coming to the rescue of the employees. So this is the new laws. According to analysts, 90% workmen fall in this category. So obviously the new code is not good news for them. Okay? Now code on social security. The code on social security extends medical coverage to all workers via hospitals under the employee state insurance contribution ESIC as a government's press release, which means everybody, all 50 crore people can get medical insurance by giving some amount from the salary, and the equal amount will be given by the employer. A few years ago, not few years ago, almost 12 years ago, when I was in IIMC, we did a research on ESIC, okay, because their chairman, Mr. Chima, was an IAS. He knew everything was wrong with ESIC. So he wanted me, I was the lead researcher for that, to see what is wrong and how can we re-engineer ESIC. Believe you me, when we did this research, and they agreed, it was absolutely state of dismal, the hospitals. The workers had huge problems because they said, since we are workers, we are labor, the doctors don't even touch us because we stink. We may not be wearing clothes as the city bred people wear, and they don't realize that ESIC hospitals are made out of the contribution of the labor. So there are a lot of issues, but now I understand some of the hospitals have become better. But then now they are only catering to less than 10 crore people, not even 10 crore. Catering to 50 crores means opening so many hospitals. How many centuries or how many decades it's going to take is anybody's guess. It's only on paper. How it's going to happen? So, but they have a fund called Reskilling Fund for Workers. On the paper, superb. So if they lay you off, they fire you, they have to pay you 15 days salary, and probably 2 months salary or something is to be given in a fund which has not been defined, which is going to reskill the worker who's laid off. How would they reskill? There's no operational definition of that. Code on occupational health and security. The maximum work limit has been restricted to 8 hours a day, which is a good idea. Generally it goes on to 12, but there's some discrepancy. Somewhere they have even said 10 hours. The code in the same breath also empowers a state government to exempt any new factory from these regulations in the interest of work and also job opportunities. So which means still on paper, nothing concrete to carry back home. So laws are often referred, interpreted, dissected by lawyers and judges. Why this class? I'm very happy you are in first year of second semester. If you are worried about your own self, the class should haunt you and you should do your own research. So till you reach the your sixth semester, you would become an expert on where to join, why to join, where not to join. I can assure you. We can meet when you are in sixth semester. So it's important that you must chew up and understand their impact on your lives. And when I was hearing Justice Ramanna, we are very smart CJI now. I quite like his judgments. I quite like when he gives lectures and talks about various issues. It's very rare to get an intellectual CJI. So he said something which I brought for you. He said there are 4 principles of rule of law. Laws must be clear and accessible. एकदम साफ होने चाहिए, and people should be able to accept, which means they should be in the public domain. They should be worded in simple and unambiguous language. Otherwise, only a lawyer can understand what the law is. It's very difficult to understand law. Dafa so and so, provision so and so, and average person cannot understand. Members of society should have the right to participate in the making and refinement of laws. One thing has happened. The last almost 10 to 12 years, the bills are generally put up by the government in the public domain. They invite people to give their views, their suggestions, which means as a person from the public or as an NGO or as a stakeholder, you can participate, but only if you know that is accessible, which means you have to be a good consumer of news and understanding, and these are generally in the public domain on the internet. So which means which is already there, making a refinement of laws. They must participate in the laws that govern them. Okay? Here we do not have, but in many countries in the West, almost every citizen gets a chance to participate in the legal courts. So, there are some cases in which there are some people who participate to give judgment. I know in US I have two sisters and they have participated a number of times. They pick up people from the general public. You could be a scientist, you could be an artist, you could be a Citibank worker, you could be a professor. So, they get a chance to sit in a court for a month or so continuously, for which they get their their leave from their respective organizations. So, they are participating in the judgments. We do not have as of now, and there in the West you can see how the judgment is going on. Here it is, the people, there are no videos made, it is not in the public domain, but it is such an interesting exercise to see how judges are delivering justices, because those videos are available online. Okay, this is very interesting. As I said, the journalists in National Classification of Occupation, the last was done in 2011, 21 I don't think, because of COVID it might be in the process. Journalists have been clubbed with authors and other writers in the classification of occupation. They are neither authors, they are not writers, they are journalists. A writer can be somebody who is writing a fiction, isn't it? The census reflects a number, as I told you, just about 7,000 to 8,000 people, which is wrong, which I already spoke to you. I spoke to you about the stringers, but where do they fit in the labor codes? The word stringer is not referred at all in any of the codes. They are calling gig workers freelancers, and stringers are not even in a professional association. They work in competition with each other. So, it is very important somebody must take their cause so that they can also be benefited through the laws. And I made a policy paper, a working paper, which I sent to Mr. Mehtab, and I have sent it in the public domain, so that wherever I could send, I have sent it to professional associations so that stringers case can also be taken up. So, as I said, I have already spoken to you about from crores to 5,000 a month, that is the kind of salary. Okay. So, I will just quote here what Financial Express said about their new codes. An uneasy amalgam of laws that cover a wide variety of workers belonging to the organized, factory, dock, mines and unorganized sector, contract construction workers. Codification is necessary to rationalize proximate labor laws, but this should not lead to bundling together of diverse and unique laws concerning disparately positioned categories of workers which are yet to mature into meaningful pieces of legislation. Journalists, to my mind, do not fit anywhere, neither organized nor not unorganized. So, they have to be treated as a very special category, which I have suggested in my policy paper, that a nuanced approach is required, which I am sharing with you before I close. Why news media requires a nuanced approach? News media and its watchdog function is expected to be an independent watchdog, an independent interpreter of news of the socio-economic and political happening in a given society. News gathering, curating, production is a highly intellectual and professional job that needs to be treated as other professions like medicine, law or finance. By putting the profession with fisheries to plumbing and the rest, it takes away the deserved place as not only a highly skilled job, but also unique, that is public interest as is calling, being a watchdog. So, you are in a job which is a public interest. You work on behalf of the people, taking their stories across. So, you should not be treated along with fisheries and plumbing job. So, the implications would be follows if these are passed. Permanent jobs become an impossibility, unbridled power with employer to give you hire and fire, cutting down to size the role and relevance of unions. Courts only play a lip service to gender equality. They are saying that men and women will not be discriminated. It has not been elaborated. The courts are employer centric. Judicial process in India in general is long drawn. Even if you go to the court, it takes you years or one generation is lost. There is no guarantee that media barons would extend social security and follow the laws. They have not done till now, most of them. Why would they do it now? The media house in general may close down non-profit making organizations. So, these are the areas of policy consideration which I have submitted to the government. In the definition of working journalists, electronic and digital media journalists have not been included in the labour codes. In the definition of employees, IR code has a clear inclusion needs to be made for working journalists employed in various media platforms. and code of wages needs to include working journalists within the definition of employees. They are saying all would be, but when you see the written document, it's not there. Most newspapers and media employees have less than 300 employees. So we are saying that please restrict only 100 for the media, because otherwise no one has a job. If you are working today, you do not tomorrow, well, you will be continuing. The complete doing away of permanent jobs, one can assume from the study of new labor codes, would lead to work-related stress among newspaper employees on the one hand, intimidation, high-handedness from the employer on the other. We are even saying that organizations less than 10 employees have been kept out of the ambit of labor laws. And most of these organizations which are working on the digital platforms have less than 10 employees, which means these labor laws are not going to even concern you at all. So this is the state of situation. Gender equity promises no discrimination among employees on the ground of gender, but you find that they are silent on special needs of women workers, including Internal Complaints Committee on Sexual Harassment and the maternity benefit leave, which has not been, I'm sure there's a different law for that, but it has not been discussed in detail. Stringers, I'm taking up the case of stringer, they should be in the definition of working journalists, okay. And then we are saying that as media establishment is not like a factory which has an assembly line, a media factory might work in a virtual situation. So we are saying that you redefine, okay. Establishment needs to be redefined and re-articulate, keeping in view the reality in the interest of employees, notwithstanding the spread and definition location of the media establishment. You might be working from home. So you should still be seen as working in a media industry. And I'm also suggesting that you should have a different or separate classification for journalists, not to be treated among authors, and this time it's authors and linguists. And in the next NSO, all categories and subcategories of classification within average media house, print, electronic and digital should be entered. If you are entered in NSO, the government will look at you, otherwise not. And then we are saying that you look at the ILO, the International Labour Organization, we are a party to that. So when you are working out the wages, please refer that. And freelance stringers, we are saying that work out a system by which it's not just paying you by words or paying you by line. You might have taken a week to cover a story. So how much time it was taken and what equipment did you use? Are you insured or not? Is your equipment insured or not? This should also be taken into account. And we are also suggesting that empowered wage board, commission, department, whatever name it is called, should be there within the labor ministry to look after the needs of wages of the journalists. And we are also suggesting that now we have Press Council of India, which only looks after the print media. So we are saying that it should be called News Media Council of India, which can cover all the various genre of news. So that's it. With this, I'll close my discourse. I hope it made some sense. Thank you.
So you all listened to Professor Jaishri Jethwani on this most pertinent issue as to what will be the impact of the 4 new labor codes on journalists. And she gave a very vivid account as to what all is there in these labor codes, what all is there, what all is not there, whether journalists should be covered as a labor, as a worker, or they should be treated as a journalist, because that's one major area of concern in the new codes. And also she talked about the social security aspect. Then also with regard to wages also, she cautioned on many such things, wherein if there is a small company, of a small media company, then obviously the wages issue is not uncertain as to how much payment is to be made. It cannot be regulated, it cannot be looked into by the government, and it will be left completely to media organizations as to what all is to be given to journalists. So journalists will ultimately will be at the receiving end. Obviously, even in the present day, today's situation when this Working Journalist Act, there are problems and the journalists are not getting their dues, not proper wages, the proper working conditions. But what we believe after listening to Professor Jaitwani, then the things will be worse as far as the journalist is concerned, and then nobody will be there to listen to their problems, to their issues and grievances. So let us have some questions in this regard, so that if you people have some kind of doubts after listening to Professor Jaitwani, you can always ask questions to her, and there can be more clarity on the issues which are not yet so clear. So may I invite your questions?
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, my question is, as you explained about the labor laws, and we are expecting so much from the new labor laws. So, can these labor laws be a ray of hope for the major unemployed population of India?
Okay. Now, labor laws are supposed to be applied on the people who are working, organized, unorganized. They are not going to generate any special employment per se, but looking after their interests in terms of wages, social security, medicine, medical requirements, etc., etc. But I don't think they can really, generate employment per se.
Exactly. Yeah, any other question? Yeah.
Yes.
Ma'am, can you give us an example of any country which is actually working in a better way for the journalist? And if it is like, in ranking order, if you can say the one who is doing the worst when it comes to the rights of journalists, welfare of journalists, and the one which is, as of now, as on date, is doing best for them.
I don't think I have a clear answer on that, but if you see journalists almost everywhere, the entire world are treated the way they are treated probably in India. The only thing is that in terms of payment and remuneration, I think we'll be probably one of the worst. And there's a huge difference. For the same story, for example, if you were writing a New York Times, the Washington Post, you'll be getting 200 times more than what you might get here. And that's all. Otherwise, journalism is a very independent kind of profession, and there's always a love-hate relationship between the media industry and the government everywhere. Is the same everywhere. And also media is in the hands of the corporate sector. So things can't be, there can be no really comparison per se. But you now see in a globalized world, if you see in the Indian context, we have global media here also, isn't it? If you see even the, FCI, if you see the foreign, we have that, investment, foreign investment in media. So you have, except for the news media, which I think is 25%, the rest is almost 100% in the entertainment media, and you're all global companies making a lot of money being in India.
In fact, if I can add to this, that the problem is with regard to the ownership of media organizations, and that basically decides as to what kind of working conditions, etc., will be there. So from the time this corporatization of media has started happening, which already started happening in the West and now in India for the last 20 years or so, so that has made the situation worse, in fact.
In fact, I was reading while doing this research for this, in Africa, there was a whole journal devoted to the state of media guys, and it's called envelope journalism. So it's a common thing when a journalist is considered a poor guy. So when he goes to cover a story, it's called brown envelope. So he or she is given an envelope to cover the story. It's taken as a matter of right. So this is the state. When you get a brown or black envelope, so what are you expected to write then? So the state is the same almost everywhere.
About the stringers and freelancers, that they are not considered under labor laws. Is it really such a bad thing? I mean, I think they are getting more freedom and they can decide their payment. So I don't think it's a bad thing.
Probably I was not able to make my point clear. I mean, there's no question of freedom or lack of freedom. We're not talking about freedom here. So when the freelancers work for a media house, there's no standardization of payment. It will be different from one to another. The two is they are not cared for in terms of their, in terms of the work they put in terms of the, the equipment they use. They are not insured, and if they are not in the labor laws, it's not a question being or not being, but being under the labor laws does not, at least it gives you a right, if you are not less than 10 people working in that organization, it gives you a right to go to a concerned authority or law and question the decision taken by your employer. And freelancers, since stringers are not included as a category, so I spoke to the Ministry of Labour concerned officer, why have you not put, he said there could be so many, and there are lakhs of kinds of jobs which are if you see the National Occupation Register, which are listed, but somehow stringer is not listed. So he said if somebody approaches us, we would include. So there's nothing wrong in that. But if you see about I think 1960s or 70s, cine workers, there's a law for the cine workers. Now cinema workers are not really a one entity, they are seasonal, they are employed when there's a cinema going on, then they go away, but somehow the association or whatever affiliation there was so strong, they were able to make a kind of a law favoring them on minimum wages for the cine workers. Similarly, even if a sales promotion employees, you have kind of a law, but not for the stringers. And for that, to my mind, either because they are not so empowered, nobody within the media industry thought about. So there's nothing right or wrong, since you are a work category, is recognized all over the world, stringer is a very well known occupation, why not include it? Otherwise, if they are not included, they may not even get their medical benefits. Even gig workers, platform workers have been now included. So stringer as a category, to my mind, should be included. It's not they have a freedom because they are not included. Nobody is putting you in any chains in case you are part of the labor ecosystem. No.
In any case, dignity of work has to be there, even if there is a stringer, and he or she is also entitled to a decent living. Yes. You cannot leave somebody, like if somebody is in a stringer, that is not entitled to a good life and the basic conditions which are necessary to practice the profession.
And he is not in a position to bargain. It's not that he has a freedom, he can ask any amount of money. Nobody stops you under the labor law. So if somebody can give him 10 times what he is getting now, superb for him. Yeah. Like some columnists get. Columnists are not stringers. You find there are lots of columnists in mainstream newspapers. They must be getting very handsome package.
हेलो मैम मैम एक्चुअली वांटेड टू आस्क कि हम लॉस की बात कर रहे हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं लॉस इसलिए भी अभी तक नहीं आए हैं कि जो जर्नलिस्ट है, वर्किंग जर्नलिस्ट एंड जो हमारे स्ट्रिंगर्स है, वो खुद अपने राइट्स के बारे में बात नहीं कर रहे हैं. अगर वहीं पे हम देखें तो जो फॉर एग्जांपल अगर कोई डॉक्टर्स है, अगर उनको वेजेस नहीं मिलते तो वो बात करते हैं या फिर स्ट्राइक एंड एवरीथिंग करते हैं, बट जो हम खुद जर्नलिस्ट है वो नहीं कर रहे. तो आपको लगता है वो इसलिए भी लॉस नहीं आ रहे हैं या वेजेस नहीं हो पा रहे हैं उनके, बिकॉज वो बोल नहीं रहे कुछ अपनी राइट्स को लेके?
वो बहुत बोल रहे हैं, वो जितनी ऊंची बोल सकते हैं बोल रहे हैं. प्रेस क्लब में देखिए रोज़ाना कुछ ना कुछ पार्ले डिस्कशन हो रही हैं. उन्होंने कैंडल मार्चेस निकाली हैं. और जब मैंने बात किया, जब ये हमारा वेबिनार हुआ था, तो अगर आप देखेंगे जो पहला राउंड था उसमें मुझे कोई भी जर्नलिस्ट एसोसिएशन या नहीं दिखाई दी, ट्रेड यूनियन नहीं दिखाई दी. INS जो है इंडियन न्यूज़पेपर सोसाइटी विच स्पीक्स ऑन बिहाफ ऑफ द मीडिया हाउसेस, not the journalists, even that was not represented. But the journalists told me that they had sent, because they knew this is going on, so they had sent written recommendations, because in the public domain anybody can give. So they had sent their जो भी उनके थे ideas थे, जो भी उनकी advices थी, जो भी उनके suggestions थे, they had given in writing. But उनका कहना ये था कि उसमें से एक को भी लिया नहीं गया, जिसमें 2-3 चीज़ें थी. परमानेंस ऑफ जॉब बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट था, एंड देन ऑन विमेन इक्विटी, इक्वालिटी, अदर थिंग्स, तो वो नहीं मानी गई. मगर बाद में देखा गया जो 2019 करीब या 18 में जब हुई थी डिस्कशंस पार्लियामेंट कमेटी की, उसमें कुछ जर्नलिस्ट गए थे. ऐसा नहीं जर्नलिस्ट बोल नहीं रहे, मगर आपका सवाल बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग और पेचीदा भी है उसी तरह से. अब देखिए जर्नलिस्ट जो है वो एक एम्प्लॉई है, उसका जो मालिक है, जो उसको अखबार को या टेलीविज़न की चीज़ें आती नहीं, अखबार को जो ओन करता है, वो अपने अगेंस्ट कैसे लिखवाएगा? आप समझ रहे हो? वो जर्नलिस्ट लिखना चाहेगा, वो स्टोरीज आती नहीं है मीडिया में, क्योंकि जो उसकी स्ट्रिंग है वो जर्नलिस्ट के हाथ में नहीं है, मालिक के हाथ में है. मगर thanks to the worldwide media, web, and also internet, lot of people started talking about these. Otherwise these things are very dormant. मगर वहाँ तो कोई भी लिख सकता है. तो आपने देखा अपने pseudonyms भी, anonymous भी, ये issue journalist के बारे में आते गए. और जब मैंने research भी किया तो बड़ा अच्छा response भी मिला फिर मुझे. तो journalist बोल रहे हैं मगर छप नहीं रहा है. Yes.
Hi ma'am, as you have discussed,
Little louder. You have to
journalists
bring it. I
are
can't hear
raising
it.
their voice. If nobody is listening to them, तो solution क्या है? Initial steps
सोल्यूशन
क्या है?
तो नहीं है. आपके देखो आ ही जाएंगे ना. लॉज तो पास हो गए हैं. यू कैन रिवर्स देम नाउ. लॉज आर पास. जब हमने उनसे कहा वेबिनार में भी that why don't you reverse it for these are the issues which concern the journalist. So the answer was laws can never be reversed.
नहीं, but this farmers law will reverse.
तब नहीं हुआ था ना. हाँ, लॉस कान बी रिवर्स. तो हमने कहा चलिए रूल्स और जो गाइडलाइंस आप उसी में कर लीजिए. तो एक कारण है जो अमरीश जी ने भी कहा, अभी तक ऑपरेशनलाइज नहीं हो गए, 1 साल से ज़्यादा हो गया. कहीं तो कुछ सरकार सोच रही होगी, अगर ये आ गए ऑपरेशनलाइज हो गए तो फिर से बहुत सारी स्ट्राइक्स वगैरह हो जाए, क्योंकि इसमें बहुत सारा लिटिगेशन होगा. ऐसा नहीं है कि आपने लॉ पास कर दिए वो इम्प्लीमेंट हो गया. द मोमेंट वो आ जाएगा गज़ट में तो हज़ारों जो केसेस हैं वो कोर्ट्स में आ जाएंगे. तो तब तक इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं होगा फिर ना.
And also, as you said, till the time they are not notified, they cannot be implemented.
They cannot be implemented. तो ये बड़ी catch-22 सिचुएशन है. और ये भी क्वेश्चन था जब ये फार्मर्स की एजिटेशन चल रही थी. ये पार्लियामेंट कमेटी वगैरह तो थी, मगर ओनली 3 hours वर गिवन फॉर डिस्कशन फॉर दीज 3 मेजर लॉज. एक तो 19 में पास हो गया था. तो उन्होंने क्योंकि सारी जो अपोजिशन ने वॉकआउट कर लिया था, they were not in the parliament, they were not in the Lok Sabha. They said how can you just give 3 hours for discussing so many laws with so many provisions. तो एक ये भी कारण था. और तभी उन्होंने कहा था हम तो जाएंगे कोर्ट में. अब गए हैं कि नहीं पता नहीं चलेगा जब तक आप मीडिया में पढ़ते नहीं हैं. Some might have trade unions might have already gone to the court. तो वैसे आप घबराइए नहीं, आप अच्छे प्रोफेशन में जा रहे हैं. अपना मतलब इन्फॉर्म चॉइसेस करिए और इसके बारे में लिखिए, अपने ब्लॉग्स बनाइए. तो ये भी हो सकता है कि पहले चूँकि मीडिया इंडस्ट्री नाराज़ रहती थी सरकार से कि आपका कोई हक नहीं है वेज बोर्ड लगाने का. मे बी बिकॉज इफ़ यू सी ऑल दोज बिग बिजनेस हाउसेज विच ओन मीडिया, दे आर पेइंग द अदर पीपल सो वेल, सो व्हाई नॉट टू द मीडिया पीपल ऑल्सो. So, I mean, we should not be skeptical about कि things are going to be really bad. They might turn out to be very good. The media houses might think, differently now. Yes.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
My name is Jyoti Mishra, and my question is: what are the new values needed to be imbibed in labor laws of countries today?
The new values. I think I spoke about it. कि बहुत सारी चीज़ें जैसे हमने कहा कि आपने 100 की जगह 300 कर दिया, वो मत करिए. क्योंकि इतनी फैक्ट्री में 300 लोग तो से ज़्यादा होते भी नहीं. इट मीन्स एनी फैक्ट्री कैन बी क्लोज. और हमने ये भी कहा कि जो मैटरनिटी लीव है, जो विमेन का जेंडर इक्विटी है, उसको आप करिए, उसको आप डिस्कस करिए, उसको थोड़ा सा एलाबोरेट करिए. फिर हमने ये भी बताया आपको कि जो वो है मिनिमम वेजेस है उसको डिफ़ाइन करिए. मिनिमम वेज कैन इवन बी 60 रुपीज़ समवेयर कि वहाँ पर हमारे स्टेट के पास पैसा ही नहीं है. सो मिनिमम वेजेस हैज़ टू बी, सिंस लेबर लॉज आर एप्लीकेबल टू द एंटायर कंट्री, स्टेट लॉ इसके साथ सब्स्यूम हो जाएंगे. तो वाई नॉट हैव, और मे बी डिपेंडिंग ऑन जैसे इन्फ्लेशन तय होता है आपकी जो सिटी है ABC क्या है उसके हिसाब से करिए. सो वी हैव गिवन लॉट ऑफ सजेशंस. दीज आर द वैल्यूज वी आर टेलिंग दैट यू.
I think now we should move towards the close of the session. There are no more questions. But then many relevant questions were raised on this whole issue, and this is something which has to go on. More deliberations have to be there on this issue, because each one of you who are sitting in this audience will be joining some or the other job in the media industry. So you will be you will be getting the first hand experience once these laws are implemented. We do not know, maybe that they are not implemented, maybe that if they are implemented there may be some amendments, some changes, and as we know that legally if no notification, then no implementation, or if the government feels at a later course also that there are so many litigations, so many labor unrest are happening, they may also back out on the implementation the way we have all seen in the case of the farmers law. But one thing remains, whichever law, whichever codes are made, they have to be fair, they have to be justifiable enough to the people for whom they are being made. If the labor or the workers are not getting a fair treatment in whatever laws are being made, so that's not a good thing, that should not happen. And particularly, as Professor Jaitwani raised this point, that journalists in the first place should not have been included in these labor codes. And if they have been included, then there have to be some such provisions wherein they are kept distinct from the other laborers working in different sectors, because journalists, whichever capacity, whichever media platform they are working, they are doing the intellectual job. They are not handling in the bricks and the construction of a building. So that kind of approach has to be corrected even if the laws are there. So all that is, I mean, all those improvements I wish will happen before the implementation on these laws, so that you all people, once you join the industry, you get good working conditions, good salaries, and you are able to have a decent life, and also that will enable you, if all that happens, that will enable you to do the kind of service which journalists are expected to do in the larger interest of the society and the country. Thank you.